We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Zayin Amud Aleph Meseches Shevuos. This is Shevuos Daf 47a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara was discussing the Mishnah, which said that if you have a situation, let's say, for example, a person is modeh b'mixas, and so he's supposed to take a shvuah, but he cannot take a shvuah because he's chashad al shvuah. So then we say instead the person making the claim against him, that person takes the shvuah in order to collect. And the Mishnah was listing examples of situations where a person is chashad al shvuah, but the Mishnah did not list a case of shvuas bitoy. Let's say, for example, a person took a shvuah in the past tense, said that I ate. He takes a shvuah that he ate something, but he really did not eat. So that would be an example where the person took a false shvuah. That's a shvuas bitoy, and it was done in the past tense. Why is that not listed? If somebody took such a shvuah, which was clearly a false shvuah, he should be suspect on shvuah, and that should have been listed in the Mishnah. And the Gemara answered on the previous Amud that it already says in the Mishnah a case of shvuas shav, which is an oath taken in vain, and that really includes v'chol dedamile, anything that's similar to a shvuas shav, and that would include a shvuas bitoy l'shavar as well. As Rashi explains, v'chol dedamile kol shvuah l'shavar, anytime an oath is taken in the past tense, that is going to be included under the category of shvuas shav in the Mishnah. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Haya echad mehen misachek bekuvya. Let's say a person rolls dice. That person also is suspect in terms of taking a shvuah, so the shvuah would go on the opposite party. Rashi explains, Mesechet bekuvya is gazlan derabanan. That's somebody who's a gazlan, but only a gazlan on a derabanan level. Damin an asmachta lokanya, because we say that an asmachta is not a real kinyan. When we say someone is gambling, that's a kinyan that's called an asmachta. Aval midoraisa lav gazlan hu, but midoraisa, the person is not considered to be a gazlan. And so the Gemara says, Hasu lamali, why do we need another example of somebody who's not able to take a shvuah? We already said, in all cases where a person is suspect, so then the shvuah is on the other party. And the Gemara continues and answers, Tana psula do raisa. And the Tana, the Mishnah, brings cases where the person is disqualified on a do raisa level. The Katani psula derabanan, but we also have cases where the person is disqualified on a derabanan level. And so that's why we bring Mesechek bekuvya. That's not a gazlan do raisa, it's a gazlan derabanan. We're bringing in the Mishnah examples of psula derabanan as well. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Hayu shneihen chashudim. Let's say two of them, both parties were actually suspect in terms of a shvuah. And so then we had a machlokas tanaim, which the Gemara will now discuss. Amar le Rava le Rav Nachman. Rava said to Rav Nachman, Hechi tanan. What exactly is the proper text of the Mishnah? And the Gemara here is asking what Rabbi Yossi says and what Rabbi Meir says, because it's not 100% clear what the text of the Mishnah should be. As Rashi explains, Hechi tanan Rabbi Yossi Omer Yachloku. Let's say again you have a situation where both parties are suspect in terms of taking a shvuah. Is it Rabbi Yossi who says Yachloku? And then it would be Rabbi Meir who says Chazra Shvuah L'Mekoma, which the Gemara will discuss. Or Rabbi Meir Omer Yachloku. Or is it Rabbi Meir who says Yachloku? And then it would be Rabbi Yossi who says Chazra Shvuah L'Mekoma. And the Gemara says again, Hechi tanan, so what's the proper text? Amar le, he said to him, that's Rav Nachman responding to Rava, Lo Yadana, I don't know exactly what the proper text is. And the Gemara continues, Hilchas Amai, well, what is the halacha? Amar le lo yadana. So he said again, I don't know exactly what the halacha is in this case. The Gemara continues, Itmar was stated, Amar Rav Yosef bar Menyume, Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Yosef bar Menyume says that Rav Nachman says, Rabbi Yossi Omer Yachloku, that it's Rabbi Yossi who is the one that says Yachloku. V'chein Tani Rav Zavid bar Oshia, and similarly Rav Zavid bar Oshia taught, Rabbi Yossi Omer Yachloku. It's Rabbi Yossi the one, he's the one that says Yachloku. Iga de Amri, there are those that say Tani Rav Zavid, they have a version as follows. Rav Zavid taught, Amar Rav Oshia, that Rav Oshia says, Rabbi Yossi Omer Yachloku, that Rabbi Yossi is the one who says Yachloku. Amar Rav Yosef bar Menyume, and Rav Yosef bar Menyume says, Rav Nachman uvda Yachloku. Rav Nachman actually had a case, and he paskined Yachloku. The idea is that generally speaking, we would follow Rav Yossi. If Rav Yossi says Yachloku, so then we would paskin Yachloku in such a case. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Again, the Mishnah said one of the opinions, whether Rabbi Meir or Rabbi Yossi, as we just discussed, is Chazra Shvuah L'Mekoma, that in a case where both parties are suspect about taking a shvuah, so then the shvuah returns to its place. And the question is, what exactly does that mean? And the Gemara says, Lahechan Chazra, where does the shvuah return to? What does that statement mean? And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Ami says, Rabboseinu shebeBavel, our rabbis in Bavel, Amru, they say, Chazra Shvuah L'Sinai. What it really means is that the shvuah returns to Har Sinai. We'll see Rashi in a moment. Rabboseinu sheberetz Yisrael, Amru, and our rabbis in Eretz Yisrael, they say, Chazra Shvuah L'Mechuyev La, that the shvuah returns to the person who was originally chayiv to take the shvuah. Rashi explains l'Sinai, it returns to Sinai. What that means is l'Shevuos Har Sinai, we were all under oath at Har Sinai. Sheishbia HaKadosh Baruch Hu es Yisrael al lo sigzol, that's when HaKadosh Baruch Hu put Klal Yisrael under oath that they're not allowed to steal. Vu yipara min hakover mammon l'chaver, and he's going to punish somebody who denies money to his friend. Avol bezdin einin is kakin lo l'Shavua v'lo l'piron. According to this, practically speaking, what it means is bezdin is not going to get involved any further. They're not going to make anyone take a shvuah. They're not going to make anyone pay. In other words, if you're going to say that the shvuah returns to Sinai because both parties are suspect of taking a shvuah, essentially, we're just not going to do anything and the money will stay where it is. That would be the first opinion. And then the second opinion is l'mechuyev la. What it means when it says the shvuah returns to its place, it means it returns to the person who is really obligated originally to take the shvuah. Again, let's say by a case of moedeh b'mixas, the person who's moedeh b'mixas, that's the defendant, he's really the one who should take the shvuah. He's suspect, so then it would go to the plaintiff, to the claimant. If they're both suspect, so again, it's either going to go to Har Sinai and nobody's going to pay, nobody's going to swear, or it's going to return to the moedeh b'mixas, l'mechuyev la, meaning al zeh shehodeh b'mixas. It returns to this guy who was moedeh b'mixas, who partially admitted. Now what would then happen, because he can't take the shvuah, v'kevan sheinu yachol yishava, now since he's not able to take the shvuah, sharei chashedu, because he's suspect, so yeshalem, so then he needs to pay. So there really is a machlokus over here. According to Rabbi Seinu Shebebavel, who say chazra shvuah l'sinai, the moedeh b'mixas would not have to pay if they're both suspect in terms of taking a shvuah. According to Rabbi Seinu Sheberetz Yisrael, so the shvuah actually returns to the moedeh b'mixas who cannot take that shvuah, and therefore he does have to pay. So you really have a machlokus over here in this case, whether the moedeh b'mixas pays or not. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rapapa says, Rabbi Seinu Shebebavel, our rabbis in Bavel, who is that? That's Rav Shmuel. That refers to Rav and Shmuel. And Rabbi Seinu Sheberetz Yisrael, who are our rabbis in Eretz Yisrael? That's Rabbi Abba. That refers to Rabbi Abba. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Seinu Shebebavel, Rav Shmuel. Now, how do we know that our rabbis in Bavel are Rav and Shmuel? The Tanan, because we learned in a Mishnah. This is our Mishnah. It said, V'chein hayisomen lo yiparu ela b'shvuah. It says also when it comes to orphans, they don't collect unless they take a shvuah. That's what the Mishnah said. And the Gemara now clarifies what exactly does that mean. V'havinon bo. We ask on that line in the Mishnah, Miman, who exactly are they collecting from? This is orphans collecting and taking a shvuah. Ilema milova. Now, if you're going to say that they're claiming directly from the lova, so you have a situation of a malva and a lova, the malva dies, and the yisomim are collecting with it from the lova, from the borrower, and the Mishnah is saying they have to take a shvuah, that would not make sense. Avuon shakal below shvuah. In such a situation, we're going to say that their father, let's say we're talking about where they're collecting with a star, so they have a document, it's in their hand, it's in their possession, and it's a document that the father had. So the father would collect without taking a shvuah. Ve'inu b'shvuah, now you're saying that they have to take a shvuah. Why would they be worse off than the father in this situation? So that cannot be what the Mishnah means. Rather, what the Mishnah actually means is as follows: V'chein hayisomin min hayisomin lo yiparu ela b'shvuah. Let's say the orphans are collecting from other orphans, they have to take an oath. In other words, the case over here would be that both the malva and the lova died. And so now the orphans of the malva are collecting from the orphans of the lova, and they have to take a shvuah. Now the nature of that shvuah was discussed in the Mishnah. The nature of the shvuah is the orphans are really not 100% sure about the business dealings of their father, and so they're essentially taking a shvuah to the best of their knowledge that this was not paid off. And so the Gemara continues, V'Rav u'Shmuel da'amri tarvayu. Now Rav and Shmuel, they both say the following in terms of orphans collecting from other orphans with a shvuah. Lo shanu ela shemeis malva b'chaye lova. This is only true if the malva died while the lova was alive. So in a situation where the malva died first, if the malva died first, so now, again, at the time that the malva is collecting from the lova, there is no shvuah. He was able to collect directly from the lova. Now the malva dies, and so now the orphans are going to be collecting from the lova, and they would have a shvuah from the lova as well, because they have to clarify. They have to take a shvuah that to the best of their knowledge, they don't know if this was paid off. But now let's say the other way around. Let's say the lova died first while the malva was alive. So there, actually, the malva needs to take a shvuah to the orphans of the lova before he collects. So kvar nischayiv malva levnei lova shvuah. At that point in time, the malva is obligated to take a shvuah to the orphans, to the children of the lova. Now that shvuah that he's taking is not the same shvuah that his heirs would take, because he's taking a shvuah that he's definitely owed the money, and again they're taking a shvuah that to the best of their knowledge they're owed the money. And so the problem is ve'ein adam morish shvuah levanav. In such a situation, a person cannot bequeath an oath to his children. They can't take the same shvuah as him, and therefore in that situation they actually would not collect using the shvuah. And Rashi explains, V'chein ha-yisomim, again, when it comes to yisomim as well, they collect with the shvua. Masnisan he bepirkin, that's the Mishnah in our parak. Ineima min halova. So now who are they collecting from? So the Gemara said, if you're going to say that they're collecting directly from the borrower, im hotziu shtar olav, they take a shtar out against the borrower, lo yiparu ela b'shvuas yorshin, ha-mefurish b'mishnasenu, so then they're only going to collect if they take the shvua of yorshim, which is explained in our Mishnah. Again, shvua shelo pakad noab, essentially taking an oath that to the best of their knowledge, the money is owed to them. So again, that we wouldn't say, because if their father was able to collect it directly from the malva without a shvuah, why would they need to take the shvuah? And so then the Gemara said, well, really we're talking about where Yisomim are collecting from Yisomim, and on that Rav and Shmuel said, Lo shanu de b'shvuah mias yiparu yasmei malva shotziu shtar al yasmei love. The Rav and Shmuel say the only time where the Yisomim of the malva can take a shvuah and collect from the Yisomim of the love, that's only going to be in a situation where it's the malva who died first, and so therefore again, the Yisomim, they would have collected from the lova with that shvuah, and then when the lova dies, they collect from the Yisomim of the lova with that shvuah. But let's say it's the reverse. Let's say it was the lova that died first, so now the malva already would need to take a shvuah to the Yisomim of the lova. Kvar neschayev malva livnei lova shvuah. The malva already himself was obligated to take a shvuah to the children of the lova. Misha shemeis lova, because from the moment the lova dies, ein lo malva li parim min hayisomim. The halacha is that a malva cannot collect from orphans ela b'shvuah unless he takes a shvuah. The kaimel and ein nifron min hayisomim ela b'shvuah, because that's a halacha. You cannot collect from yisomim unless you take a shvuah. And the problem is then when the malva dies, that same shvuah cannot be given to the malva's heirs, because ve'ein adam morish lebanav mammon shu mechuyev olav shvuah, because a person is not able to bequeath to his children mammon upon which he has to take a shvuah. Alma, so we see from this, what's the whole point? We see hoel v'hu mechuyev shvuah shelo eskabalti chov zeh, since he himself was chayev a shvuah that he never received this debt. V'yisomen ein yicholim lishavakein, and the orphans, they can't take that shvuah because they don't know for certain. They have to just take a shvuah to the best of their knowledge. Ela shelo pakadnu abba, they just say that our father never instructed us. V'yein zu hashvuah hamutelas alavim, that's not the same shvuah that the father is taking. V'gam yasmei lova ein yichon lishava shaparu avin, and the orphans of the borrower, they're not able to take an oath that their father paid. So therefore, ka'amar Rav u'Shmuel shelo yiparu, therefore Rav and Shmuel would say that in such a situation, again, where the malva himself had to take a shvuah, and then the malva dies, so then the yisomim are not able to take the shvuah, and then they cannot collect. And the whole point over here is as follows. Alma, we see, hamechuyev shvuah ve'ein yichon lishava, if somebody is obligated to take a shvuah, and they're not able to swear, lo zeh v'lo zeh, that meaning either party is not able to swear, svira l'Rav u'Shmuel, so Rav and Shmuel hold, chazra shvuah l'Sinai, that the shvuah goes back to Har Sinai, ve'ein kan lo shvuah v'lo piran, you have no shvuah, you have no payment. That's what Rav and Shmuel are saying over here, and that's what they would say in our case as well. We will note over here, and this is discussed by the commentators, that these are slightly different cases, because in the case of Moed B'Miksas, there we're talking about a situation of a shvuah that actually gets you out of paying, and in such a situation, Rav and Shmuel are saying that if both parties cannot take the shvuah, so then the person is patur, he doesn't have to pay because no one can take a shvuah. Again, that's talking about a situation where the person taking the shvuah would have been obligated to pay money, no one can take the shvuah, and now he's not obligated. Here in this case, it's actually the reverse. Here in this case, you have a situation where really the shvuah is being taken by the malva or by the heirs of the malva who are collecting the money. And so in this situation where the malva was chayav a shvuah because the lova died, so he was chayav a shvuah to the yisomim of the lova, he's not able to bequeath that, so to speak, to his heirs. They can't take the shvuah. So in this case, they're not taking the shvuah and not collecting. It's not that they're not taking the shvuah and not paying, but it's a situation of not taking the shvuah and not collecting. In any case, the Gemara over here is equating the two. And the Gemara continues, Rabboseinu Sheberetz Yisrael. Now, who are our rabbis in Eretz Yisrael? Again, Rabboseinu Sheberetz Yisrael were the ones that said, let's say in a situation of Moed B'Miksas where neither party can swear, then Chazra Shvuah L'Mekoma, the shvuah returns to its place, which is the person who is Moed B'Miksas, and he cannot take the shvuah, and he actually would have to pay. That's what Rabboseinu Sheberetz Yisrael say, and who is that? That's Rabbi Abba. That is Rabbi Abba. And how do we know that? There was a person who stole a bar of silver from his friend. This is the case that's known as Nascha de Rabbi Abba. Also, Lakami de Rav Ami came before Rav Ami. Yosef Rabbi Abba came in, Rabbi Abba was sitting in front of him, and the case went as follows. He brought one witness, and the witness testified that it was stolen from him. Amar Lei, and so then the person who's being claimed against, the person who's being accused of being a thief, he said, yes, chatvi, I did in fact take it, but v'didi chatvi, but what I took was actually mine. I did steal it from him, so to speak, but it was actually mine. And so the question is over here, you have difficulty in in terms of giving the shvuah, because you're supposed to give the shvuah by Eid Echad. The person is supposed to take a shvuah that essentially contradicts what the Eid Echad says. The Eid Echad says you stole it, and he would take a shvuah that I didn't steal it. But over here, he really did snatch it. So Amar Rabbi Ami said, how should judges judge this case? Name zil shalim, if we're going to say they have to go and pay. So leka trei sahadi, you don't have two witnesses against him. Generally, it takes two witnesses to make someone pay. Now, niftere, let's say that the person is totally potter. Ika chad sahada, we do have one witness against him. Name zil ishtabel, let's go tell him that he should take a shvuah. But kevan damar michtaf chatvi, since he says that I stole it, havalei kegazlan, he's like a gazlan. The simple way of understanding it is he's not actually a gazlan, because he's saying that he took what was his. But the point is, just like a gazlan can't take a shvuah, this person also is not able to take a shvuah because he's essentially admitting to what the Eid Echad said. And so Amar le Rabbi Abba, so Rabbi Abba said to him, have him mechuyev shvuah, so he is technically obligated to take a shvuah because there's an Eid Echad. Ve'ein yochol lishava, but he's not able to take the shvuah. V'chol mechuyev shvuah ve'eino yochol lishava, anybody who is obligated to take a shvuah and can't actually take the shvuah, meshalim, he pays. And so that also, it's equivalent really to our case as well. You have a situation in our case, let's say again, by the mode of a mixas, neither party can take a shvuah. It's chazra lemekoma. Technically, the mode of a mixas is obligated to take the shvuah, but he's not able to because he's suspect, and therefore he would have to pay. That's why Rabbi Seinu Sheberetz Yisrael refers to Rabbi Abba. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, Kivase de Rabbi Abba mistavra. It makes sense to say like Rabbi Abba, meaning it makes sense to say that in this case, the shvuah would return to its place and the person would actually have to pay. The Tahani Rabbi Ami, because Rabbi Ami taught, Shevuos Hashem tia ben shneim. This is a brisa that Rabbi Ami taught. It says in the pasuk, Shevuos Hashem tia ben shneim, v'lo ben hayorshin. And the pasuk is teaching us the shvuah is between the two parties, but it is not between the heirs. Now, what exactly does that brisa mean? Hey Chidami, what exactly is the case over here where we're excluding the yorshim from the shvuah? Ilema de Amar Le, if you're going to say the case is that he says to him, Moneli Abba bi'aravicho. Let's say he says to him, there was a money that was owed to my father by your father. Again, you have a situation of two yorshim on both sides of the case, the plaintiffs and the defendants. And so one of them, the plaintiffs, say, your father owed my father money. And what's the response? V'yomar Le, and so then he says back to him, the heir of the lova says back, Chamshin Islay, 50, yes, that's true. Really, he does owe you 50. V'chamshin Leslie, but 50, the person does not owe. So in other words, he's certain. The yoresh of the lova is 100% certain, and moedim mixas, a regular case of moedim mixas. Maybe that's the case where we're saying there is no shvuah. Shevuos Hashem tia bein shnehem. The Shevuos Hashem is between both parties, but not between the yarshim. But that wouldn't make sense. Mali hu umali yavu. What's the difference between him and his father? If a moedim mixas takes a shvuah, this case also is an identical case. This person also should take the shvuah. As Rashi explains, Bein Shneim, it's between the two parties, and Bali Hadin Kayamin, meaning if the two litigants are alive, so then the Shavuos is between them. But again, if it's a classic case of Moed Mixas, Mali Hu Mali Avu, what's the difference between him and his father? Me'achar Shutoin Tainas Bori, if the Yorish is able to make a certain claim, Lama Ino Yachli Shava, why can't he take a Shavuah? He should take a Shavuah, which is known again as the Shavuas Moed Mixas. So that cannot be the case. And so the Gemara says, Elalav, rather is not. The case that the Bryce is talking must be as follows. The Amar Le Mone Liaba Bi'aravicha. Again, he says, your father owed my father money. Amar Le says to him, Chamshin Yadaner, with regards to 50, I know that it is true. He owed him money. But V'chamshin Lo Yadaner, but then on the other 50, the Yorish is saying, I just simply don't know whether that money is owed or not. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Zayin Amid Beis.